My name is Scott. I'm an addict, and I paid him to say all that. Yeah, I celebrated 45 years clean February 19th. My clean date is February 14th, 1974. And when I got clean, there was no NA east of the Mississippi River, at least none that anybody knew about. And I went to AA for a while, and I want to be real careful how I put this, because there were some people in AA who were very important to me and who loved me and helped me stay clean. There were other people that I encountered in AA who seemed their primary purpose was to chase me out because I was a dope fiend, you know. So finally, I had it, and at that time I went back. Oh, I went back to school once I got clean. A lot of us do that. I was 31. And 5 years later, I had a graduate degree, and I was working on a PhD. Because of Narcotics Anonymous, not because of me, and because of God as I understand God. So anyhow, I had been to these meetings. So I was at this meeting Wednesday night, on a Wednesday night in Johnson City, Tennessee, in a church on Watauga Avenue, where I'm sure someday they'll build a monument. And I had it, and I was the topic again. No, could I be there? Should I be there? Et cetera, et cetera. And I came around to me, and I said, "Well, let me tell you something, fellas. Your primary purpose is." You say the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. I have a desire to stop drinking, and none of you people are big enough to put me out. That was a lie, because there are a couple, 3 people in there that could throw me across the church. But that, you know, but that I had it. I've been through those things before, and I had it. So the next morning, I'm at the student union, having some coffee, and there were some girls that I had classes with. I didn't know them really, but I knew them well enough to say I'm getting coffee. Other than that, I didn't know much about them. And they were talking, and this one girl said she was had been talking to her boyfriend who is in prison in California, and that a group of people had come into this prison to tell him about getting off drugs, because he was arrested for dealing, but he was also someone who used. And she was so, you know, and so I heard that, and I thought, you know. So I asked her, I interrupted her. I'm such a pleasant person. I interrupted her and, you know, and asked her. And she said that she had contacted her boyfriend, and he had told her about this, and that the chaplain at this prison had arranged this, and that she ought to, and I asked her what prison. She told me. And so I called, I got the chaplain on the phone. And I basically told him what I was doing. He said, "Oh yeah, that's Narcotics Anonymous. They come in here once a week." And I said, "Well, do you have a phone number for me?" He said, "Oh yeah, sure. I know I have." And you could hear the paper shuffling and drawers opening and closing. And he came back on. He said, "No, I'm sorry, I've lost it." But he said, "Why don't you just get directory assistants for Metro LA. And I did that. I wasn't in Los Angeles, in Sun Valley. And I called, and the phone rang 3 times. And about halfway through the 4th ring, I heard this voice. It said, Narcotics Anonymous. My name is Jimmy. I'm an addict. And I knew finally, God, I have found someone who's going to understand what I'm. And so I told him my sad tale of woe, thinking that he would want me to jump on a plane and fly to California where I could be healed. But no, that's not the case. He says, well, there's only one thing to do. And I said, what? He says, well, you get a coffee pot, find a room, I'll send you some literature, and you just start an NA meeting, which is the very last thing that I had ever thought about when I started that conversation. And from that day to this, I've been pretty much involved in Narcotics Anonymous because it saved my life. I ran into people who really didn't understand me. Greg Christian's my sponsor, and oh my God, I'll tell you this. This is an example of what an egotistical person I am. Greg wrote the pamphlet, Triangle of Self-Obsession. Okay. Well, he told me one time that he wrote that after talking to me for 2 hours on the phone. I thought, oh my. And for a month, I ran around thinking that. And finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, did you really do that? And he looked at me and laughed. He was trying to tell me that I needed to read the pamphlet. Okay. But when he passed, it was really hard thing. Nonetheless, I'm supposed to talk about leaning on a higher power. And I learned, I got here, and I'm one of these people that had the, I was raised in the breeding ground for addiction, the Good Christian Home, and I had this kind of Christian upbringing that I didn't pay much attention to it. I mean, I started using when I was 13. I used till I was 31. And I had lost a daughter, and I just could not believe that God was good. Anything that would kill my daughter was just. So I had this. I had this man on with God, and I was going to prove to myself and to anybody who encountered me that was a myth. I pretty much tried to do that. And like I say, I got to the point that, and I'm not going to bore you with the details about this, but I found myself put in such a situation in 1974, in February 14th, 1974, that I had to stop using. And I had known that this time was coming for a while. And so I started doing everything I could to get off. Now, I was speed freak too. I loved visiting the moon and the planets and the outer solar system. I would go there as frequently as I could. But I had some trouble with my vision. I was going to have surgeries and have transplants. I've had 5 by now. And in order to do that, I had to be clean, you know. And so I tried and tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't. I couldn't. I mean, I did all the stuff that I used to do. I did phenobarbital, try to come down, use lewds, yeah, whatever, to try to get out of orbit. And basically, finally, what happened is I ended up face down in the cat's litter box in the bathroom. Yeah, cat didn't like that either. I mean, you know, cats are real particular about stuff. And so I ended up in a med-surg hospital. I had an ulcer that perforated, and fortunately for me, the doctor who admitted me, and this was a small town in Tennessee, the doctor who admitted me was an AA member. And he knew what was wrong with me because he'd seen, you know, I had been bounced. I went to my first meeting when I was 24. You know, I was in trouble big time from almost the beginning. And so I went to my first meeting when I was 24. And for the next 7 years, I bounced in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. So I knew some people, and this doctor was one of them. And so he put me in a hospital, got my ulcer straightened out, and then wouldn't let me out, and then wouldn't discharge me. He wanted to make sure that I was dried out, detox, whatever. And so he kept me there, not so much against my will. I mean, I could have gotten up and walked out, but I was tired. I was beat. You know, I just couldn't do it anymore. No matter what happened, I couldn't do it. Then he discharged me, and I went up to the eye hospital, and they did surgery. And then, you know, one of the surgeons who had done transplants came in, sat down, and talked to me. And he, my friend, the doctor in Morristown, Tennessee, had told him about me. And so he sat down with me, and he said, Mr. Allison, the surgery has been successful. The graft's in there, and it looks good. Now, this is 1974, so things are a little bit different now. But he says, I need to be very frank with you. I've talked with Dr. You know, and he tells me that you are an addict and that you use stimulants. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I need to tell you this, and you need to listen to me very carefully. If you use what you've been using, it will increase the intraocular pressure of your eye, and the graft will blow out. So immediately, I had this picture in my mind, me shooting dope, a pop, and my eyeballs being on the other wall looking back at me. And I kept that in my mind for a very long time. Thank you. I'll find it. It's all right. Oh, okay. Anyway, so that I got clean. I got into recovery. I didn't get clean. I got into recovery. Let me put it to you that way. Or I got into abstinence. And so I didn't use for 3 years. Things happened. I got my first graduate degree. I moved to Atlanta in 1980, and there was all this excitement about the basic text, you know. And it had been, I had heard about it. I had come down to Atlanta in '79 to the World Convention, you know, and there was probably 500 people there, I think. Yeah, and it was incredible. I'd never seen so many addicts in one place. But here we were all together, and nobody was trying to, you know, hit anybody over the head and take their dough. But so so, and I met, when I came down, I met Greg. And I met Bo. And I already knew Motorcycle Ed, because one of the things that happens, he came up to the at that time he was and still is a glazier. He puts glass in. He's retired now, but he was on a job up in Johnson City, Tennessee, and we had this meeting that we had started in this church at Tri-City Airport, which is about 14 miles from Kingsport, where he was working. And all Ed knew was that there was a meeting somewhere near the airport in a church. He got into a cab, spent, well, he saved $1. He spent the last bit of money he had except $1 coming to that meeting. And I'll tell you what, when he walked in, I was just so happy. And it has been one of my best friends ever since. And that continues. The relationships that I've established by God's grace in this program are just incredibly precious to me. I mean, there's no way it transcends any words that I have to try to describe what it feels like. Anyway. Yeah, I'm supposed to be talking about leaning on your higher power, and I've rambled around, but anyhow, I do that. Those times, now I've heard people say how wonderful their first year clean was. That was not my experience. My experience was the first year I was clean was the closest thing to hell I've experienced in my life, because I wanted to use every single minute. You know, my skin crawled. You know, even my teeth wanted dope. And but I didn't pick up. And people told me, well, what you do is you say a prayer in the morning. You ask your higher power to, you know, what I was, there's right people on, ask your higher power to keep it sober, and then at night, thank you. And you know, my attitude was pretty much, if there is a God, he screwed over me. So I think that's absurd. But a miracle happened. I did what they told me to do. In the morning, I got up and I said, please keep me sober. And at night, I said, thank you. So I don't believe you're there, but I'm doing this because they tell me to. Thank you. Goodbye. And I would go to bed. And from that start, that beginning, I built a relationship with the God of my understanding that is the most intimate and most precious thing in my life. And the program allowed me to do that. First, you told me that there was a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. And if you think that isn't a big deal, listen, I was batshit crazy when I got here. You know, I had been carted off to the loony bin and locked away a couple of times. I fortified our house one time and chased my wife out. Didn't have, and the kids. Didn't have any guns because my dad had taken those away. And the police came, and I fought them off by throwing dishes at them. So, and they took me right away. So I had evidence that there was something wrong with the way I conducted my life. But I got clean by doing what the program told me to do. And one of the things the program says to me is that I have to find a power greater than myself And how do I do that? Well, for me, it turned out to be the steps of Narcotics Anonymous. Because I'd say I'd been reared in a Christian home. Okay. I could cite you passages from the Bible and tell you stories about the apostles and all that stuff. But it couldn't, didn't mean anything to me. So I learned how to be a child of God in the program of Narcotics Anonymous. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. And then in the third step, I decided that's what I wanted to do. Now, this is the tricky part for me. I made that decision in 1975, okay? And from then until about 2 years ago, I searched, worked, and tried to find a power greater than myself that I could relate to. That includes, we baby boomer hippies. That also includes running off to India to find God and trying to go to Tibet, where I only found the Red Chinese Army. And they were not interested in my spiritual development. So I searched and searched, but it didn't pick up. I stayed involved in the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous. I continued to do what people told me to do. I got up in the morning, I said my prayers, and throughout the course of the day, and I'm not one of these people that can turn my will and life over to the care of God in the morning at 6 o'clock and leave it there. I turn my will and life over to the care of God at 6 o'clock. At 6:15, I've taken it back. So throughout the course of the day, I don't know about anybody else, but I have to be in the business of reminding myself that I have turned my will and life over to the care of God, and that God is in charge, and it's His will, and that's better than anything I can think of for myself. Now, like I said earlier, I was raised that you said grace before meals. And I adapted that sort of to help me in my quest to remain, have my will turned over to the care of God. Because when I eat, that's a big deal. Now, that's a big deal. I pray before I eat. It reminds me I have an opportunity to turn my will and life over to the care of God again. So 3 times a day, it's a big deal. And then at night, before I go to bed. I am convinced in my heart, based on my own experience, that it is only through God's grace that I am here in the program of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm here because God loves all of us. And I know that. But I'm also here because Narcotics Anonymous provided for me, and I'm talking about myself, a practical, day at a time way to find my relationship with God. It did it. Now, a lot of things have happened to me since I've been clean. Good things, some bad things, but good things. And I've enjoyed that. Like I say, I've gone to, when I got here, I was 31-year-old high school dropout with a criminal record. 5 years later, by God's grace and because the program works, I had a master's degree and was all cranked up to do a PhD. which I didn't complete, by the way. I got sidetracked and went ahead and did an MSW. But and as a result of that, I have been able to have an impact, a positive impact on addicts in certain circumstances. I became the director of the Upper East Tennessee Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependency. And I was able to put counselors, because up in the hills of Upper East Tennessee, nobody's got any money. It's real poor, and the school system is pretty poor. So we were able to put assist with counseling services for high schools and around. And that's when I got hooked on kids again. And but then the administration in Washington changed, and the funding dried up for most programs like ours. So I didn't have a job. That's when I came to Atlanta. And I got down here, and fortunately I found a job working at Peachford. And I stayed there about a year. Yeah, about a year. And I left because I found myself put in a position that I could keep my mouth shut about something one of the very important people was doing that was contrary to everything I believed and that everything recovery stood for, I thought. So I left. And I was really lucky. I ended up at Ridgeview Institute just as the impaired physicians program started. And I had an opportunity, and this is important for me in that I had always had this sneaky suspicion, no matter how much I tried to tell myself, no matter how much I read, that addiction was my fault. You know, it wasn't really disease. It's just because deep down someplace I was so sorry. You know? And I tried to make that go away, but it wouldn't. And I prayed about it. But so anyway, I ended up at Richard, and I'm working there. And there's a bunch of research going on, and we're hooked up with a group that's worldwide doing research on addiction. And it's about that time that the Israelis took a picture through an electronic microscope of DNA with an abnormal cell on it that suggested very, very strongly that might be where addiction started. So I began to believe that, yes, what I have is a disease. It's not a moral failure. I was born with it. And that gave me a lot of peace. Because I never wanted to hurt anybody. I never wanted to do some of the things that I did. But, you know, I would have done anything to use. Now, I used to sit around in meetings early on and hear people talk about some of the stuff that they had done. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, well, I didn't do that. And then it dawned on me, hell, you didn't have to do that. If you had to do that, you would have done it. And that's a fact. You know? If I had gotten to a point that doing whatever was what I had to do to get another fix, I would have done it. I would have done it. But by God's grace, I'm here and I am clean this day because the program works. And it works in large measure because I think two men were divinely inspired. The first one wrote the 12 steps. The second one saw the flaw in them, and made the change that saved my life. What Jimmy did when he changed alcohol to addiction in the first step was shift the focus of the disease from alcohol outside of you to addiction, an internal thing that you could deal with. That and the We Do Recover. That 1965, Jimmy wrote that. It's part of his story in the Little White Book. NA it's not always been as alive and vibrant as it is today, And at one time, it almost died out completely. But for Jimmy Kennan and a lady who did everything they could to keep it going, and it succeeded. So, but everything that I look at about the program of Narcotics Anonymous appears to me to be divinely inspired, whatever you call it. You put any label you want to on it. But this program did not jump forth from some human mind all by itself. I don't believe. I do not believe that. I don't know, I've probably been talking too long because I get cranked up and I can go on and on. Okay. Well, a couple other things. About 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, which is a brain disease that protein grows in your brain cells and kills them. And when the doctor told me about that, he came in and said, "Well, Mr. Allison, this disease is going to kill you." I thought to myself, "Well, hell, that's a walk in the beach." But then he says, "But worst case scenario is it'll be in 8 years. Best case scenario, it'll be in 15 years." And I looked at him and said, "What are you talking about? Man, I live my life a day at a time. So 8 years from now, go away. Go away." But I am beginning to feel some of the effects of it. I'll be honest with you. I stutter. I lose words. But the funny thing about it is people wouldn't, and they love me anyway. And I'm just really fortunate. At this point now in my life, I'm 76 years old. I can't. I don't see well enough to drive at night anymore. And truth be told, during the day either. But sometimes I sneak around, and then my wife finds out, and we have to. Then I ended up making amends for a week. She's in the program too, so you just. I want to emphasize this, and then I'll shut up. We get an opportunity here, by God's grace, to do something that impacts in a positive way the lives of many people. We help people who are stricken with a terminal disease. We help them find a way to recover. And in so doing, they help us find a way to recover. Thank you very much for having me. I truly appreciate the opportunity to have been here. I wish I'd known about this earlier. I would like to come and spend the week, but that's kind of a tricky thing for me. My wife works in order to keep me in the style to which I've become accustomed. Yeah, I get, I have Social Security and I retired from the state, so I have a little pension. But I'm just so glad to be here. It is so good to be with you. It is so good to be in a place that you're safe, secure, and loved. Thank you very much.